It doesn't matter what softwares you know today, because with time, every technical skill gets outdated. What truly stays with you are the core principles, your mindset, and the way you think about your subject. Welcome to the Foundations for UX Design, a 15-episode series that will take you through all the important lessons and realizations I've had so far as a self-taught UX designer. My name is Ansh Mehra and I am a product designer and storyteller at Zuddle.com, which is a virtual events hosting platform. In this session, we will be learning some of the most common mistakes students make when they begin their career as a UX designer. I hope you've seen all videos from the series preceding this episode. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this session. So without wasting any further time, let's get started. Welcome to Lecture 14 of Foundations for UX Design. This is your host Ansh Mehra, and today we're going to talk about some tips and tricks on becoming a better storyteller. So you would be wondering, what is the benefit of being a storyteller and what exactly will we learn today? We will first understand what is the purpose of learning storytelling. How does storytelling help you as a professional? Then we will understand why do we need to learn storytelling? Then we'll figure out some tips and tricks on becoming a better UX designer, especially working from home, and a couple of small details that you can use to accelerate your career. So before I go on talking about why do we need to learn storytelling, let's understand why do people like stories in the first place. Most people my age don't really appreciate unsolicited advice or free gyan, right? But everyone enjoys a good story. Everyone is happy to listen to a storyteller. They might be hesitant about being with a preacher or a teacher, but when it comes to storytelling, everyone is willing to hear a good story. I would request you to take a step back and understand that all of us are writing our own stories. We as human beings are living a life where we don't know how our story will end. So we're always very anxious. But when someone else comes up with a story, we know for a fact that this story is gonna have a hook, and if it is narrated properly, we might feel excited about it, and in most cases, this story will have an end. You would be knowing a lot of people who watch the same TV shows again and again. There are a lot of people who feel pretty comfortable knowing the fact that they know what the end is. So they keep watching the same TV shows, they keep watching the same movies because they feel comfortable in the fact that they know how the story will end. So long story short, if you're a storyteller, you will have more people listening to you. Instead of giving direct advice, instead of giving direct facts or knowledge, it really helps to create a narrative. And just because people enjoy listening to stories, they will always give you more attention. If you start spending time observing autobiographies or observing case studies, you'd realize that the universe often repeats itself. You'd figure out that there are some parallels between entertainment and sports, between music and architecture, subjects that might seem really different, but on a very deeper level, they often mimic each other. There are patterns that repeat. And I spoke about this in my very first video. It's called What's My Story? We already spoke about this. So I recommend everyone to read books where they can study subjects, where they can study really different subjects. Because once you start observing how the universe works, you will start recognizing patterns. And pattern recognition as a problem solver, as a designer, is a very useful skill. If you read enough, if you study enough patterns, if you regularly collect inspiration, you will often understand why something happened. When you see an app, when you see something succeed, when you see something happening, you would very easily trace the events that led to that specific point. And the next level of this observation is that once you read a lot, once you start observing, once you start communicating, once you start connecting the dots, you will slowly know what will happen next. Because you know that history might not repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? It's a very popular quote that history might not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So when you get better at pattern recognition, your ability to predict what happens next improves. And that is a very big superpower. So when you get a problem, you'll be like, oh, this is not a new problem. It looks like a new problem, but it is actually mimicking a very old problem. So it's another one of those, right? So the more experience you have, the better you get at recognizing patterns, and it just becomes easier for you to predict what will happen next, and then you can prepare a plan to deal with the upcoming opportunities. Another trick that I usually use is that every time I want to share a life lesson or a story or an incident, I create fictional characters. Because in a lot of cases, when you tell a story about yourself or your life or your personal circumstances, the listeners often judge you and then listen the story. So the way they perceive your story, the way they listen to your story is influenced by what they think about you. So this is a trick that you can also use. Pick a very exciting, very interesting incident from your life. Tell your friends about it, but don't say that it is your stories. Instead of saying that it happened to you, say that it happened to your friend. Then see the difference in their reactions. You will get the absolute unbiased reactions when you detach your personality from the story. Because if you say that this happened to me, there are two things that are going to happen. One, you will not get their absolute unbiased reaction. You will get a controlled reaction. Even if they don't like the story, they will not say it to your face. Why? Because they don't want to offend you. They don't want to reveal how they feel about the story, because they don't want you to know their actual feelings. But if you say that this happened to my friend, then your listeners will detach the person from the story. Then their focus is going to be just on the story, just on consuming the narrative. And then you can actually see what they feel about the story. I'm not saying that I do this regularly. It's just a fun thing to notice, right? So you can try it and see it for yourself. Every story is a narrative, right? And narratives allow you to take someone into a different world, right? When you tell a story, when you deliver a narrative, you allow people to experience things. You allow people to enter your zone, your created universe. I want you to understand that it's not just stories that deliver narratives. Everything around you, everything that you consume, everything that you buy, everything that you've been experiencing is influenced by narratives written by other people. If you've bought something the past 1 month which was slightly expensive than usual, there was a narrative delivered to you. You might not even notice it, but you have consumed a narrative written by a team of really intelligent people that convinced you that you need to buy that item, that you need to feel good about your purchase. And narratives also include the experience of working with you. When someone works with you, or when someone communicates with you, or when someone interacts with you, they go back with a narrative in their heads about you, and they take that narrative and spread it to other people. They talk to other people about you, and you have to make sure that that narrative, that reputation, or that word of mouth is acting in your favor. If you know how to influence that narrative, you will have much better connections. Your ability to meet new people will improve. How people perceive you, how people think about you will improve. And it's just like overall a very, very helpful skill. Because when you're working in your company, your colleagues are always observing you. I'm not just talking about fellow designers. I'm talking about your developers, your PMs, your co-founders. Everyone is observing you, and everyone is updating every day how they think about you. And I'm not saying that everything that you do has to be about impressing other people. What I'm saying is that you can leverage the power of controlling your narrative, of being a storyteller. You can leverage that power to inflate your valuation in your industry. So let's just go outside UX, right? We don't have to talk about just UX design. Let's just talk about normal product. You must have noticed so many products being sold at 100x premium, not because of their raw material, not because of their quality, but simply because of the narrative attached to the purchase of that product. Pick any industry that is coming to your mind, and you would realize that there is at least this one brand that is, of course, selling good stuff, right? People will not pay if the quality is not good. But once you achieve a good amount of quality in your product, there is no limit. There is absolutely no limit to the premium that you can charge if you know how to control the correct narrative, if you know how to create a story around the purchase of your product. Let's just assume that there is a random notebook available in a bookstore, and that notebook is being sold for, say, $100. The design is fabulous, it looks great, everything is alright, but it is being sold for $100. Now there is another notebook. I attached to a story to this notebook saying that the paper used in this notebook was recycled from a very remote village, and there is a person who has been in this business for 500 years, and it is a generational business and they have produced only 50 of these notebooks, and when you buy this notebook you become a part of their family, and when you write your poetry on these pages you are contributing to their welfare, you're contributing to the culture, you've become a part of something that is very big. And even though this notebook is priceless, you cannot put a price on quality, you cannot put a price on superior experiences, we have decided to sell this notebook for $1,500. Because there are limited pieces, we've been very careful about who has access to these notebooks. But if you have expensive taste, if you are in the bigger leagues, if you are really serious about your craft, you can obviously consider buying this notebook for $1,500. I have just made up this narrative right now. It is a fictional narrative, and it was a very exaggerated narrative. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there are products that attach stories and then they use these stories to inflate their valuation. So a notebook that is probably worth $100 is now being sold at $1,500 simply because of a story attached to the experience of purchasing that notebook. Of course, people do this for other stuff as well. You can do it to your brand as well. You as a professional carry a brand with you. Everything about you, whether it's your work, whether it's your communication, whether it's your network, whether it's your word of mouth, everything influences that narrative. And you can break it down into multiple pieces and figure out that, okay, this is where I can improve the narrative. Let me read more on that. This is an area where I feel that I'm weak. Let me work on that. And then slowly build up your narrative and use those narratives to inflate your valuation in the market. But there's an important flip side to this. If you are pretending to be really good at your job, if you are pretending to know everything, you might just get a fabulous opportunity, but 6-7 months down the line, you will get burnt out because more people will come into the picture and they will slowly recognize that this person had a very strong brand, but the quality of the work is not that good, right? And at that point, you will be under a lot of pressure to deliver as fast as a person who is actually very valuable. That inflated story, that inflated valuation will act against you. So I always recommend to first work on your craft, first figure out what you need to learn, figure out the technical aspects of your job. And once you have established high quality, once you've made your notebook really well, once your notebook is best in quality, then figure out how can I take it to the next level. If you only inflate your values, if you only focus on the storytelling and the narratives and the marketing and the communication without the substance, without foundation, without concrete value, the market will correct you. And by correction, I mean that eventually the market will know that your price is actually much lower than what you are pretending it to be. So they will often correct you in a span of 1 or 2 years. And that is very heartbreaking. Don't let that happen to you. So I think most of my viewers are in the beginning of their careers. So I would recommend you to read about this subject in parallel right now, but focus on just becoming a better designer. Focus on just being good at your craft. Eventually in a span of 1 or 2 years, you can start figuring out how can you improve your perception as a professional designer. And I would like you to go back to your school days and remember what used to happen in our math examinations. So when I was in school, my math teachers would look at my answer sheet and first check the answer. They would look at the bottom of the answer sheet, first check that the answer was correct, and then go back to the top and see the steps. If I only had the answer on my answer sheet, I would not get the marks. I would get marks only if I've shown the step-by-step process of how I reached that answer. You will not get marks if you only show the steps, because if you only show the steps without the answers, you might just get like 5 out of 10. If you only show the answer without any steps, you will get 0. But I want you to understand that your teacher first sees the final answer and then decides if he or she wants to invest the time in going through the steps. They will not go through the steps if the answer is wrong. When you're showcasing your case study, when you're pitching a new feature to your co-founders or to your clients, right? I show the most attractive stuff in the beginning and then I take them through a step-by-step process of how I got here. Because after seeing that first slide, they know that they are happy being here. They are happy investing the time to go through the steps. If you just give your UI, if you just give your prototype without your flows, without your wireframing, without how you collected your inspiration, you will get 0 marks. In fact, I've noticed a similar pattern in filmmaking as well. So I, as a viewer, I always enjoy movies that begin with a non-chronological screenplay. Chronological means that everything happens happens in sequence. But I personally find screenplays engaging when they begin with the climax. Like you start your movie, you start your TV show, and they show you a glimpse of the climax, and you've seen the climax, and then they say, how did we get here? Like they show you the entire story, the entire sequence of how you will get to the climax. Because when you begin a movie or when you begin a TV show with the climax, you essentially put your audiences at rest. The audience now knows that this is how the climax is going to look like. I can listen to your story and I can, invest my time here understanding how did we get there. So it's an interesting observation. You can observe this in films, you can observe this in examinations, you can observe this in normal day-to-day storytelling as well. Begin with the climax, try non-chronological narratives, and you will have more people listen to you. So let's just figure out how can we improve others' experience of working with us. You need to figure out what else do you bring to the table apart from design. I understand that you're applying as a UX designer, but you can charge higher premiums. You can actually attract more opportunities only if you bring more things to the table apart from design. So in my case, it was video editing. It was understanding of Photoshop and Illustrator and some part of graphic design. So that is what I got apart from UX design. So you have to figure out what else can you bring apart from design onto the table. If you do that, spend some time working on those side hustles, on those side skills, and trust me, you will have more opportunities. So let's just cover some really obvious tips that I just wish people knew at the beginning of their career. Tip number 1, if you're in a meeting of say 5-6 people, if you know that 3 or 4 people can leave the meeting, please allow them to leave the meeting. So I know a lot of friends who keep telling me that, we have meetings where we just sit and don't say anything. We just say for like 30 seconds or 60 seconds, but we're just supposed to be there because there's no one to make the minutes. Just have someone make the minutes. It is so easy. In fact, there are some applications available that come on your Google Meet call and they make a transcript of your entire call and then they make minutes out of that. If you are the manager, if you're the senior designer, and if you're having a Google Meet, politely point it out to that person that, let's just pick a random person, let's say Natasha, that Natasha, if you have something else to do, you can leave this call. Don't openly say that if there's anyone who wants to leave, they can leave. No one will leave. Why would someone leave and become the culprit? When you put this open-ended permission that if anyone wants to leave this call, that's all right, no one would do that, because then that person feels like they're betraying the tribe. So what you can do is you can say that, Arjun, Natasha, if you guys want to leave, you can very well leave, because you don't have to be here, because you have to allow other people to work, right? So don't have really long meetings where people are just sitting, because when you ask people to stay on these meetings for 30-40 minutes, you essentially burn their time and you create a loss for your company. Your company is losing money. When people are not working, when people are sitting in meetings, just witnessing conversations, you are wasting their time. You're wasting the salary that you pay them for their time, and you're wasting their energy as well. So if you're the senior manager, please make sure that you have minimum amount of people in your online meetings and you have the minimum time spent on these meetings. Teach everyone how to talk in limited sentences. Teach people how to say less, like how to communicate more in saying less. And trust me, you will have disproportionate returns in the longer run when you respect everyone's time. Tip number 2, learn how to text properly. A lot of people text in a very crude way, in a very raw way. Type as if you are tweeting. Have limited words in your sentences. If you feel that your texting sounds very rude, leverage emojis, because when you're working in offline offices, you have your face, you have your body language, but when you're on Slack or when you're on Messenger or when you're on email, all they can see is your text. If you don't know how to text properly, you will often miscommunicate your intentions. Tip number 3, don't forget to mute yourself. There are so many people who sit near the window and they open the windows and you can hear the traffic and the dogs barking, and they're in the meeting, but they're just ignorant about it. Please be very conscious about the sounds in your environment. If you feel that you're in a loud room, just exit that room. If you feel that you are sitting near the window, close the window. If you feel that you don't have any other place to go, mute yourself. Unmute yourself only when you want to speak, because there's so many people, like they would be on the call and they would have the mic here in front of their mouth and you would just hear them breathe in the middle of a conversation, like 2 people are talking and then you would hear the third person do this. I'm like, how is this person breathing so heavily? First of all, like, what is wrong with this person? And why is this person not aware of the fact that he or she needs to be on mute? So please, these are such normal things. Tip number 4, if you are giving someone feedback, figure out how their mood is like. Figure out at what timelines are they operating in, because if you know that the opposite person is at the very end of their timelines, or if they've already delayed their timelines, don't give them a lot of feedback, because you know it's impractical, right? You can give detailed feedback at the beginning of the design process, but if they're at the very end, if the developers are already waiting and there are, timelines, you can't really give them absolute feedback on everything that you can improve. And the second case is that if you are giving feedback at 7 p.m. in the evening, that person would not be in the correct headspace. If you want to give feedback, give it in the morning. Always have your feedback calls at the beginning of the day, because when you give someone feedback, when you criticize someone's work at the end of the day, you are essentially getting them at the wrong timings. They are not in the mood to hear you because they are tired, they want to go back home, they are already annoyed that there's a call after 5 p.m. So don't do that. As a manager, as a senior designer, or even as a developer or as a PM, please be mindful of the timelines, and please be mindful of the context, the situation, or the opposite person's state of mind before you give them feedback. And of course, we've discussed how to give feedback as well. That is a completely different skill altogether. And I'm not saying I am perfect, but I am also learning these things. I am learning these things from my seniors. I'm learning these small things from my managers. So because I'm learning from them, I thought I will just give these same tips to you as well. One very important trick is something that I learned from Warren Buffett, and he says, praise specifically, criticize generally. Praise specifically, criticize generally. When you want to criticize, don't criticize the person. Don't say that you've done this flow incorrectly or your visual design is really bad. Criticize the approach. Say that this border radius does not work, this typography does not work, this kind of structure in your auto layout does not work. Don't say that you have done this wrong. Say that this approach is wrong and you have to change the approach. So when you criticize the approach, you essentially keep the person relaxed. Then that person is willing to learn, because anyone would change their approach, right? But if you target the person, then you create a very negative situation where the possibility of that feedback being implemented reduces with time. So I would like to end the video here, because I know I've shared a lot of tips and we're almost at the end of our episode here. We are almost at the end of this free course. We're at the episode 14, and in the next episode, I'm just going to share my final thoughts, a plan for you to learn ahead. I feel very happy when you guys put your comments. In fact, we are collecting video testimonials from people. So if you want to be a part of the video testimonials, please email me on anshmehra2498@gmail.com. We are getting people on our social media. If you go to my Instagram, you can actually see their video testimonials, and we're giving a small treat for everyone who volunteers to give their video testimonials. With that being said, I hope that you're taking care of yourself. You can always connect with me on Instagram on anshmehra.work. Make sure you like this video, make sure you subscribe, and I hope that you guys are learning. If you're here for the first time, make sure you finish all the episodes in this playlist. This playlist is available in both Hindi and in English. Keep designing awesome stuff. This is Ansh Mehra signing out. If you like this video, make sure you click on like and hit the subscribe button. I regularly upload videos on UX design, marketing, and storytelling.